If you haven't met me yet, if we haven't met, I'm Joyce, the assistant minister here. And before anything else happens, I want to acknowledge these musicians. Thank you so much. Isn't it wonderful to see people expressing themselves so freely? And of course, that is our theme of the month, freedom. And to support us in that theme, we've got a book that is entitled The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself. I love that title. You know, it is so in line with the way we're talking about freedom, particularly today, because the question before us is, how can we free up and express more of ourselves? And I mean that word self with a capital S, referring to our largest, our divine selves. In our philosophy, we know ourselves to be part of God. I'm so fond of saying, like the wave is part of the ocean. So what we're looking at is how can that wave that you and I are, that wave, how can that wave know itself to be more than just a little wave being tossed about? How can that wave embody and experience more and more of the ocean? How can we express and experience those qualities of the Divine One, joy and love, more good, more abundance, more peace, more power, more life? Last week I was talking to the stage design team. You know, we have a stage design team now. This is a group of artists who collaborate. And I want to stop right there, and can we applaud that new thought? A group of artists who are collaborating. They're doing a bang-up job. So I was talking last week, it was still July, I was talking to Alicia Carroll from the team about what they had planned, and she said that the team had talked about freedom and that they thought it was really important to use the Science of Mind symbol this month because they realized by using the ideas and the practices of science of mind, we can, in fact, set ourselves free. So I want to thank the design team not only for this beautiful stage, but inspiring me to talk about that symbol that is often associated with the science of mind. Particularly when people are here, they don't exactly know what they mean, and in fact, Alicia said to me, someone said to her, what is it? Does the V stand for Edward Fillion? You know, what is that? So I thought, okay, it's been a while. Let's just talk about the symbol. So I want you to picture that it's the beginning of the 20th century. Can you picture those long dresses and those old-timey cars? And there's a young Ernest Holmes who's so curious about the world and how things work, how it all works together. He's voraciously reading about all the religious traditions in the world and looking at all the philosophers from all times and places and delving in, even as a layman, delving into the most advanced science of the time. And he came to his own understanding of how it all works together from the most macro level of God and the universe right down to each of us and each cell in our body and beyond. So one day he was teaching his summary and he was standing at a board and he said, now first of all we have to realize that everything is God. There's nothing outside of God. So he drew a big circle. And he said that represents that everything is God. Chairs, trees, you, me, it's all contained in God. But even though there's just one thing going on, it does have three aspects. And he drew two parallel lines, horizontal ones, to cut the circle in top, middle, and bottom. He said, so this is how it works at the divine level. The thought of God, think of that as being in the top part of the circle. The thought of God, or the creative impulse of God, moves through unformed divine substance, and he located that in the middle. And when that thought of God moves upon unformed substance, then things are created. And by the way, this is an ongoing process to make that clear on the symbol. He had the thought of God coming into form over and over and over again eternally. Now, there are two pretty interesting things about this symbol. One is that today, in cutting-edge contemporary science, scientists are beginning to describe how the universe works very much like that. They're using different words, but the creative process is the same, 100 years after Holmes. And the second thing that's interesting about this symbol is that it not only applies to the divine creative process, it applies to our creative process. So think of yourself, think of your thought, making a choice which has an effect on that unformed substance, that place of all potential and possibility. And then that thought, that choice, results in an experience in your life. Now, not every thought, but certainly, have you noticed that thoughts that you've held consistently over time, especially if they have feeling with them, they do tend to show up in your life. Have you noticed? So it's a pretty stunning thought. It was stunning in the 20s. I think it's still stunning today. So Holmes invites us not to freak out. He writes some pretty encouraging words. He says, "Let us then approach the science of mind with awe, but not with fear, with a truly humble spirit, but not with any sense that we are unworthy, and certainly with no superstition. Let us approach it normally, happily, willing to accept it, glad to experiment with it, believing that as a result of our efforts we shall derive this great good, a better understanding of the natural laws of life as they apply to us and our relationship to the universal scheme of things." So you see, he was assuring us that if we take on this understanding and start to experiment with it, good things are going to show up in our life. And he was also assuring us that this was a natural process. There were natural laws at work here. It wasn't anything supernatural. Well, now turn the clock ahead several decades. It's the 50s. And you can imagine what the cars look like and the kind of dresses, once again. And now Holmes is a little, he's getting toward the end of his life. And he joins with Willis Kinnear in writing this book, A New Design for Living. And in fact, we're looking at this book all year long. What I find very remarkable is that Holmes's understanding of how things work has remained the same for some 40 years, that with just minor variations, he's been very consistent in the philosophy he put forward. So this month, we're looking at Chapter 3, Don't Limit Yourself, and the title for today's talk comes right off of page 31 here. The title is Remove Superstitions. Now, of course, we all have a sense of what a superstition is. You know, it's one of those things where, people might attribute a causal relationship when it's not really true. You know, something like, this is my power suit. When I wear this suit, people pay attention to me. That kind of thing. And if we want more examples of superstitions, we need look no further than our own childhoods. I remember quite distinctly being about 3 and looking at the television and thinking that there were little people living in that box. And of course, my understanding of how things actually work in the world expanded as I matured, and also my thinking ability matured so I could understand things. Here is another thought of some wrong beliefs from somebody else's childhood This is told in Chicken Soup for a Mother's Soul. It's very brief, so you want to pay attention or you might miss it. It's entitled, I Don't Want a New Baby. I don't want a new baby. This was my oldest son, Brian. His response when I told him his father and I were expecting a third child. Now, we survived the first round of sibling rivalry when his brother Damien was born. But now 3-year-old Brian had made his stand about this new baby, and neither logic nor persuasion could budge him. Puzzled, I asked him, "Why don't you want a new baby?" With wide and teary eyes, he looked straight at me and said, "Because I want to keep Damien." Now, as adults, we can smile at a child's misunderstanding, but I can begin to imagine the kind of suffering that little Brian was experiencing for these days when he thought he was going to lose his little brother Damien. And that suffering, of course, was due to ignorance about how things really work in the world. And so it is in our own lives we can limit ourselves and cause suffering for ourselves simply because we have a misunderstanding about what is really going on. An example from my own life, I might be, I should say that because erroneous thinking can cause suffering, it is why our philosophy puts such a big emphasis on looking at our thinking and making sure that what we're thinking about ourselves is actually in alignment with what we know to be true about the Divine One. So I might be harboring a thought that I'm not good. And that thought, I don't know where it came from. Maybe somebody when I was little told me I wasn't good, or maybe I've spent too much time comparing myself to idealized human beings in the media. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. But I do know that when I'm functioning with that belief that I'm not good, it leads to a kind of a suffering for me because it causes me to suppress myself. It keeps me from expressing my gifts, my talents, my love with others, because I'm thinking I'm not good enough. And I also know that when I stop to remind myself that I, like you, are part of God, are part of divine spirit, and that divine one is only good, then I must come to the logical and mature understanding, the accurate understanding that I am good, you are good, only good. And that thought relieves my suffering and frees me up to express more of myself, my love, my gifts, my blessing presence, just as it does for you. So I want to take a look at two ideas that Ernest Holmes considered to be superstitious, and they had to do with the way that some people had been talking about religion. So the first idea is a limiting idea because it has us picturing an outside God that has created us. And this God who created us separate from himself, in fact, prefers some people to others. And by the way, this is not just a judging God, but also a moody God. So even the best of us have to do something to placate him from time to time. A pretty limiting belief. And not true according to Holmes. Because according to Holmes, remember, we're all part of God, therefore we're all divine. All of us are naturally as close to God as we could possibly be. We can't get any closer. The only apparent spiritual difference among us may be that some of us might be more aware of that closeness. And also in science of mind, of course, this God is not judging or moody, it's impartial. Remember the teaching symbol. Any thought from anyone has equal opportunity of impacting that unformed substance to have a result. Holmes puts it this way: can we believe that there is a God who picks out some man and says, I will honor your prayer, but I do not think so much of Mr. So-and-so? It's superstitious to believe that God will answer the prayer of one above another. So again, in describing that middle part of the symbol, Holmes was very fond of using the image of soil as this impartial thing. Anybody can plant a seed. Anybody, doesn't matter who it is. If a person plants a flower seed, they're going to get a flower. And so it is. The first freeing idea is that the Divine One is impartial. We're all part of it. And anyone can use the creative process. Here's the second old limiting belief. It says that the truth has already been revealed. It happened in a specific time, in a specific place, to a specific person. It's a done deal. It'll never happen again. There is no more truth to be revealed. Well, Holmes's teaching contains a much more freeing idea, and it's this: the revealing of the truth is ongoing, and it's available to each of us. If you were here last year, you'll probably recognize these words of Holmes. We believe in the direct revelation of truth through our intuitive and spiritual nature, and that any person can become a revealer of truth who lives in close contact with the Divine One. Oh, and I should also mention that according to the old limiting belief, not only was truth revealed just once and it's done, but it's also impossible for miracles to happen. The age of miracles is over. It happened with special people, and it's over. No, says Holmes, right here on page 437 in The Science of Mind, he says, we cannot believe that Jesus had a power not possessed by others. To think this would be superstitious. We certainly cannot suppose that he was especially endowed with power from on high, for this would be to believe in a partial God. There's but one logical explanation of the power of Jesus. He believed what he taught and so completely lived his teachings that he was able to demonstrate them. And we should remember that his will was ever in accord with the divine mind. So let's just remember for a second what Jesus taught. He taught the Father and I are one. It's done unto us as we believe. And when you and I truly, truly get that, then when we pray, there will also be apparent miracles that are happening, but we'll know they're not miracles at all. They're not supernatural. They're simply the natural law of the Divine One working through us to bring about things in our world. So that's the second contrasting old limiting belief and the new one. The old one, there are only a few people who've been given truth and power, versus all of us have equal access to spiritual truth and to spiritual power. Now, let's consider for a moment if any of these beliefs are still influencing us. Of course, when we look at them like we just did, clearly we can tell the logic and the truth of the newer belief, but we have to realize that these old limiting beliefs were passed down for generation to generation for so long that I think it's a good idea to notice if there's any echoes of them in ourselves. So that first limiting idea that God is a partial, moody, judging being. Some people are chosen, some are not. I have to watch my P's and Q's to do things to placate some divine judging force. Well, put like that, it does sound ridiculous, but I would ask you to consider, is there anywhere that you are holding the belief that other people are blessed or favored in a way that you are not? I know for myself, I grew up in a working class home, and I noticed at one point that I was carrying around the idea that I was just no good with money. There were these wealthy people, for some reason, they were chosen to be wealthy. It was some mysterious process. They knew how to make more money. I didn't know how to do that, and I never would because I was chosen to grow up in a working class household. Well, obviously, that belief is not only limiting, it's just not true. And I ask you to consider if there's any such belief rattling around in your life that other people are favored to be something or to do something you can't. And if you notice it, to really question, is it true or not? And then there's this idea that we have to placate some outside force to do something to make sure it's happy. Well, okay, I suspect that all of us have gone beyond making animal sacrifices on the altars in our backyard. But I wonder if there's any place in your thinking, like there sometimes is in mine, that I'm responsible for other people's experience. That if I had done something differently, they would have been happier. That it's somehow up to me to ensure that everybody's having a good time and everything is going well. We call it codependence. And if such a thought may be rattling around again in your consciousness, let's remind ourselves that whereas it is important to be kind and compassionate, to do the best we can, other people do have their own reactions and experience no matter what we do. So, the other old limiting religious belief, truth was revealed once, no one else can access divine knowledge or power. Again, you can probably see how false that is, but may I suggest that there may be somewhere in our thinking that we have handed over our powers to others, usually known as experts, and we think they know a truth we cannot know. I notice in myself a tendency to do what a doctor tells me, to take it as absolute truth, and I really have to work to stay open to looking at other points of views and approaches. Or there may be a limiting idea that others can do certain things that we cannot do. I have a girlfriend that needed some new tires, and because she had never known anything about how to get new tires, she figured she just didn't know anything about how to get new tires, and she never would know anything about how to get new tires. And she started to notice that she was kind of slipping into a victim mentality, that other people knew how to get tires, but she didn't. And then she woke up to the fact that she was doing this, and she also remembered that there is an internet which gives impartially to all and all alike. And she ended up getting those tires at a reasonable cost, great tires. So whether it's knowledge or the ability to do something that we don't yet have, may we continue to remind ourselves that God is delighting to express as you and is always providing you with all the information, all the knowledge, all the resources that you need. You need go no further than turning within. And I invite you now to turn within and consider a couple questions. I invite you to consider, is there somewhere in my life that I would like to be freer? And as I consider this, do I notice that there's an old limiting thought or belief here that I could release? Is there a new freeing thought or belief that can support me here? And knowing that questions asked always receive answers, is there a question your heart would like to ask now in this silent sanctity of stillness? Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. We recognize the truth of these words because we recognize that there is one power, one presence, a presence of love, that all intelligence that shows up right where each of us is, that is always working for us to reveal our heart's desire for us. And so I stand with all of us in the assurance that as we go forward in our week, that we are able to notice what's not working and release it, that the things we have been thinking about just this past couple of moments are already in effect, that our heart's desire is already working to free up, that Spirit indeed is with us hand in hand, making it possible to release limiting beliefs, accept new liberating beliefs, and to move forward, expanding in joy and peace and love and harmony in every moment of our eternal lives. For this I give thanks as I release this word. And I invite us just to stay for a moment in that silence. And with that sense of celebration that comes when we know the truth, that all is well and getting better, I invite you to begin to make a transition into this time of celebration, this time of thanksgiving, this time of sharing. I invite our ushers to stand. As each of us takes our gift in hand, we have the opportunity to say together, I bless this gift. I free it up to heal and prosper. It does good work in the world and blesses creation. Thank you for accepting our gifts.